Hey there, Showa fans. It's been a minute, but I'm back again with another fancy retrospective into the amazing original era of the Godzilla film universe. While I primarily focus on the final figures and movie reflections of that glorious time period, I thought I would spotlight something that has been a huge part of my fandom of Toho's giant monster films. The often referenced, but now out of print, the inaccurate yet wonderful monster series Godzilla book by Ian Thorne. It may be hard to imagine, but back in the late 70s and 80s, books about Godzilla were few and far between here in the US. While famous monsters often put the spotlight on the Big G, there was no comprehensive volume that focused on the King of the Monsters filmography. These days, you can find many in-depth books, fanzines, articles, and let's not forget the plethora of websites dedicated to Godzilla's world. But for those of us who started our fascination with the kaiju in some of those earlier decades, there was only one main book available. Part of a collection of horror-themed monster series by Crestwood Publishing, Godzilla was written by Ian Thorne and featured his, or her, more on that in a bit, take on the movies from the very first 1954 film to the 1974 Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, along with spotlights on Rodan and Mothra. Terror of Mechagodzilla is absent from this volume, and I suspect it may have been written prior to its re-release, despite the publishing date of 1977. It is no wonder I was taken by surprise one afternoon when it was announced that the film would be broadcast on TV one summer afternoon in 1985, as I held on to every word of the book as an end-all be-all. But in hindsight, the book has many inaccurate facts that have created the Mandela effect on many since its release. For example, the author mentions the much-touted alternate ending of King Kong vs. Godzilla, in which Godzilla emerges the victor, so the outcome would appease both sides of the Pacific. We all know how this is indeed false, but it plagued the legacy of that film for some time. Occasionally, weird anomalies like a kaiju named Godzilla being mentioned, Gigantus is designated as being a female Godzilla, not sure how that was determined. Not that Ian Thorne, aka writer Julianne Clare's pen name needed to be a die-hard kaiju fan, but her assumptions became something of public perception of Godzilla, like how she mentions that he's green and breathes fire. Suddenly, the Hanna-Barbera cartoon makes a lot of sense now. Despite those criticisms, the 47-page book must be applauded for pulling back the curtain on the movie magic of monster making. It was perhaps the first time I witnessed how these marvelous monsters were brought to life through photos of Ijai Tsuburaya inspecting his work and an illustrated diagram of a Godzilla movie set with all its working elements. But perhaps the true highlight for me was the usage of both black and white stock photos and promotional composite photos that lace the pages. Many of the latter images would include the added effects like whitening out the monster's eyes, a la Batman, to give them a more sinister visage. Airbrushed atomic breath and other powers were painted over these photos to really bolster the excitement of the image. This is where the book shines, as I spent time after time renting and re-renting this book from my elementary school's library just to look at the various shots of these films in full detail. And because I was a naive kid, I convinced myself that many of these doctored promo shots were actually film screen grabs. The pasting of the wrong Godzilla suit, and in some cases maquette, in different movies somehow fused the idea that Godzilla looked the same in almost every film. Even if I knew the King Goji was very different from the Mega Goroji. The monster ensemble of Destroy All Monsters, both set photos and cut and paste hacks, showed all the monsters confronting Ghidorah. Again, creating the Mandela effect that Baragon and Varan were indeed in several shots fighting Ghidorah. I just didn't focus on it as there was so much going on. As much as that hampered what the original films presented, it also enriched them in my mind because of said misconceptions. It is likely why we place our Baragons, Mandas, and Varans not on the sidelines in our displays, but in the mix of a Destroy All Monsters Battle Royale diorama. Some of my favorite images are the iconic face-off between King Kong and Godzilla, Keisuke and Reiko fleeing the foreground while Mechagodzilla looms in the distance, confronting a ghostly King Caesar. The King Goji advancing on Hokkaido military base, and the Godzilla puppet furiously blasting Mothra's wing, which appears to shatter on impact. In closing, this book brought Godzilla to me when I waited for the day that one of the films would air on some random weekend afternoon. When we didn't have the luxury of a Godzilla channel or Tubi or owning all the films to rewatch on home media like we do today. It was this book that cemented my fascination with the world of Toho's kaiju, filling me with false information, false memories, and fantastic photos that are burned into my mind to this day as a 50-year-old man. It is not perfect, hardly, but the nostalgia of taking this home from the library and visiting these giant monsters over and over again contributed to why I collect the movies, the toys, and create content like this on my channel. What about you? Were you obsessed with this book like I was? Do you own a copy today? What are your favorite things about this? Share your comments and thoughts down below, as I am very curious on what they may be. Also, if you'd like to support me, please like, subscribe, and share my channel. Despite my brief hiatus, I have plenty of other topics, reviews, and retros coming down the pipeline. Stay tuned, and as always, thanks for watching.